think a lot of people that are ADHD and anxious end up becoming self-help junkies because you're like, I got to figure this out, man. So I'm very much in that category, especially things like habit formation. They would say, okay, do the same thing the same way. And if you do that enough, it'll become automatic. And right around the time it should become automatic, my body rejects it. I'm like, I am not doing this. I will lose it if I have to do this one more day.
Welcome to the Art Plus Audience podcast. Hello, Andy J. Pizza. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey, Stacie. I'm really pumped to be here.
I was just telling my husband about interviewing you, and he's like, is Pizza his real name? And I bet you could ask that more than anything in the entire world.
I get that asked almost every day. And no, it's not my real name, but I do really love pizza. When I go do school visits, I ask the kids, like, who thinks that's my real name? And some people raise their hand. I said, who thinks I love pizza so much that I married it and took its name? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, that's closer to the truth.
You're every fifth grader's hero.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. It's funny because I made that change in the way I identify as an artist way before I was making picture books. So it was very on accident how well that fits into that world. And so when I go to schools or book readings or whatever, they're always like, Mr. Pizza, it's Mr. Pizza. And I'm like, man, I did not even plan this, but it works.
It's lovely. So Andy, I'm so stoked that you're here because if people don't know you like they should, you have this amazing podcast, Creative Pep Talk, that I've listened to for years. I love how you're unafraid to talk about like hard things like mental health, but also you're all about creative inspiration. And, I don't know, I just feel like you love to get in deep into little crevices of this life that a lot of people don't know how to express, but feel. And you are really good at putting words to it. So Thank you for what you do.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I think it ebbs and flows. Sometimes I'm really like jazzed about the career element of it. I really think a lot like a career strategist almost, mainly because, on the other side, I'm neurodivergent. I have all these different mental health things that I've tried to account for in my creative career path strategy. Yeah. And so they're both sides are always kind of present. And I think they are really important to see them as connected. And so, yeah, I think you're spot on there.
I'm similar in the sense that like, okay, when people work with me or take one of my classes or talk to me for too long, they always ask me like they're like, how do I put this? Are you ADHD? Are you this? And I'm like, well, actually, my flavor is OCD. And so I talk about it openly too, because it's so much a part of like the work I create or have created in the past, and figuring out like people look at how I work and I'm a real workhorse, but it's because there's a part of my brain that needs to like really get into all the little details of things and understand it inside and out. But that's fun for me. And that's like how I thrive. And so I think figuring out how you work is like the most important thing, because we can't replicate Andy's life, can't replicate my life or my career. It has to be like what serves you. I've had students be like, I would hate to do what you do, Stacie. No offense. I love what you do, but like it would be hard. Has anyone ever talked to you that way too?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's funny. Like, I've been doing this podcast for 10 years. When we hit the 500th episode, I went back to some of the early episodes just to kind of review a bit, but I didn't want to because I was very afraid. I knew it was going to be painful in all kinds of ways. But when I started listening, I was pleasantly surprised to find out that so many of the topics have been a thread throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
And, I didn't understand them as well, or I wasn't as polished talking about them, but I realized like, oh, these are the first 3 episodes. These are the same things I'm talking about topically. And one of them is called Strengths. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the core of the show is this positive self-psychology, which is not, it's a different thing to positive thinking. It's nothing like that in the psychology space. It's a well-known shift where they went from the Bible of psychology being the DSM, being like, this is what's wrong with you, to, oh, what if we start with what's good about your psychology? What can we work with? What if we assume that at your core, you're not broken, you're actually good, and you need to channel these things? And so that's kind of what strengths-based thinking is about, and neurodivergence is about. Neurodivergence is about saying not that you're different and this is your disorder necessarily, but you're different and this is what's great about it. And this is how you can channel it. It's not necessarily broken if you know how to channel it. So yes, I think that a huge part of everything I do is assuming that all these quirks have positive attributes if I channel them correctly and I build a lifestyle and a way of approaching work that maximizes those things. And so my everyday is not going to be palatable to most people. And I think that's the ideal, because then you're really contributing something that only you could contribute. And that feels great too. That's what, I derive a lot of meaning from that. I think there can be a lot of meaning to be found in work when you approach it that way. But unfortunately, our system is more set up to create, I don't want to be overly harsh because I feel like I don't want to be like, they create the cogs. Yes, I think there's some truth to that. Like it is like a human assembly line going through school, trying to create, and I actually love education. I'm a big fan of school, but I do think an awareness of we're not creating the same individual that can just be plunked into any scenario.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I totally am with you there.
And that leads to like, if you can identify that, then it can come through in your work and your creative voice, which is easier said than done. Like whenever I'm talking to other artists and we talk about standing out, because people want to be, they want to build a creative brand. They want to be artists who, in many cases, can create some income, if not full-time income, and build this audience. And the advice is like, be fully yourself, like put it into everything. But if you don't actually think there's good parts of you, number one, that's going to be really, really hard to be vulnerable and put that into your work or talk about it as if it's not something like to be embarrassed of or shameful. But like, what does it even mean to like get really weird with your art? And that's the thing that makes you stand out. I think I've been doing this long enough that I think we've, maybe gone through the hard parts of what it means to like be not sure who we are, and then take risks and then put it into these big projects and put it out into the world. And so like 16 years later, I'm a lot more comfortable with myself. But like, what about when you're talking to people about their voice and it emerging?
Yeah, I love what you said at the start there. I loved all that, but the start gets at this thing. I did a series. It was kind of a bigger series. It's the one that it's called Right Side Out. It was episode 449, I think, and we did 6 episodes. It ends with an interview with my mom, who I am mostly estranged from, but I'm assuming this is where I get the ADHD, because it is hereditary and it's not my corporate accountant father. So I did this series because I wanted to explore that theme of positive self-psychology. And the kind of climax of the series is this idea that you can't make art you love if you hate yourself, because art is self-expression. You're never going to love that expression if you hate the thing it's an expression of, which is you. Yeah. And so that sounds nice, but I think it's actually true. And so when I was starting out in my creative journey, I was in a place where I'd watch my mom really struggle, and she'd left my family and started another family, left that family, never held down a job, just a lot of struggles, ended up with all kinds of other things going on. And I felt like, oh, I'm like this and I want to be the opposite of that. And so I spent my first, into my teens and first half of my 20s really trying to run away from who I was. At the same time, I was trying to create an art practice, which is really ridiculous, but I couldn't see that contradiction. I couldn't see like, oh, you can't run away from yourself and self-express at the same time. And so it wasn't until I started the journey for diagnosis to ADHD. And this is the funny thing. I talk a lot about ADHD. I'm not medicated. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with medication. I know it's saved lives. It doesn't work well with my system for a bunch of reasons we don't need to get into. But I talk about it a lot, and I say I'm not medicated because I think it gets misunderstood sometimes as like, oh, I discovered this, I got medication, my life changed. What changed actually was learning about myself and learning like, oh, this is the kind of brain I have. And then the more I read about it, the more I was introduced to this idea of neurodivergence. And I started thinking, oh, maybe my mom's problem wasn't who she was, but that she was trying to be somebody that she wasn't.
Oh,
And she
yeah.
kept failing over and over at trying to be something else. And I quit trying to be the opposite of her. And I started to question whether it would be more productive to try to be more like her than she let herself be. And so all of that is like storytelling. Like I wrote all of those lines over years because, that narrative kind of helped me work through it, but it's all true. And that was for me, that's why making art that you love, that feels authentic, starts with loving yourself. That's a worldview. And it also rubs up against lots of prominent worldviews. I don't like to polarize for no reason. So there's plenty of stuff I don't talk about. I'm not afraid to talk about anything, but there's a lot of things I choose to not talk about for kind of purposeful reasons. That saying that, I'm aware of, the more people think about it, they're going to realize, oh, that's actually a controversial thing to start with. You're a good thing that should be cultivated.
Yeah.
I'll go to my deathbed on that one. So I'm happy to polarize. And I think if you're an artist, I think it's really essential to develop some positive relationship with yourself, even if you won't go as far as I will.
Well, what's funny is being who I am and the parents I grew up with. Now, first of all, let me say, I don't know how you do it with being able to talk so openly about your family because my parents are alive. I have relationships with them, and there's so much about my story that people will never really be able to know, and they don't necessarily need to know, but who I am and how I was shaped is, part of my DNA, but also like the environment I grew up in.
Sure.
And so without trying to mom and dad, if you're listening, I love you, but without trying to dig on you, I was brought up in this really anxious household. What if the bad thing happens? Just expect it all the time. And so by the time I got into adulthood and, I got married young, I've known the guy I married since I was 12. So he's used to this, whatever this vibrating energy is that I have. I didn't realize how negative and punishing my thoughts were all the time. And so for one reason or another, I ended up going to therapy, and I've been in therapy for, 6 years, 7 years. And there's several different times, EFT, emotionally focused. And then I've done the thing where you're trying to help with trauma, EMDR. And I've done that work for a while. And
I want to do that. I
okay,
feel like I could use that.
I think that I wanted to deny it to myself because I believe people have gone through way harder crap than I have. And so I think that in my world, in my mind, I was like, I should be able to handle this because if you look at it, my life is not terrible. So when I finally started going to therapy and the doctor suggested I might have obsessive compulsive disorder and these intrusive thoughts that were literally controlling everything I did, I was terrified whenever he wanted me to deal with it because I was like, what's going to motivate me now? When I really started to think about it, it's I don't know who I am without this pressure. And I avoided some of the work I needed to do for a while because I thought it was who I was. It is who I am, but it was the most punishing part of who I was, and it had become the most dominant voice in my world. And so when we did the work to finally start untethering all these things, and I started to wake up in the morning and not feel the immensity of terribleness of I thought I was horrible. I thought the bad thing is about to happen. The luck that I had was luck and it was about to run out, no matter what I did, no matter how successful I was. And so when I finally had the breathing room to be I'm still who I am, and the thoughts don't have to control me. And how do I take what I'm left with, which is maybe the not so punishing parts of obsessive compulsiveness, and let it be an attribute? I got a lot happier. I think I've been afraid to be happy as a creative. Sometimes people are always talking about creativity has to be born from pain, right? But when it can come from this place of joy and celebration, it's way more fun, frankly. Yeah. And fun is not bad. And I used to think that if you're having fun, that means that you're not really aware of what's happening in the world. So that's part of my journey with it. And then, raising kids then, just being I see it in them too, these things that are me, that they have. And I'm man, if I can just help them to get to love themselves a little bit faster, then maybe they'll just have more opportunity to I don't know, is just happiness wanting that to be so bad? I struggle with happiness. People are shocked. I'm a nervous smiler, Andy, so people think I'm happy all the time. I'm really just you don't want to know. I'm an anxious person. But all that goes into I don't know, the work I was doing before I figured out like maybe this part of me, and the work that came out as I was like learning to like myself and love myself. And then now I'm 16 years into this career and I pretty much do whatever I want, which is a totally different feeling. And you're there too, right? You're chasing
Yeah.
projects you love and taking on the work that only
Yeah.
you want to. Like, what does that look like for you? What is your work like?
Yeah. I'm just going to address one quick
Yeah.
thing that you said because it's something that comes up a lot. People hear the story that I talk about, and I don't tell my mom's story. I tell my story, and she's a character in that story.
Yeah.
But I don't. There's so much that I don't talk about, even things that happened to me with related to my mom that I don't share because I think it's just kind of encroaches on her dignity in a way that I
Absolutely.
don't want to. But people are like, "Oh, I wish I could talk about my family like that," and I always think this is the blessing and the curse of being abandoned by your mom at a young age. So, that's a big part of it is that as a human to human, I feel like I owe her dignity, but I don't feel like I owe her a ton more than that. And I also talked to her about it. I told her when I first started exploring talking about this and her being a piece of that, I told her early on. And she's actually, even though I've had a lot of pain and struggle in relationship to her, she's a very gracious person. And so when I told her that, I actually showed her one of these talks and then I interviewed her about it. It's a blessing and a curse. That'll be the bookmark for that section or the bookend. Yeah, my everyday. So my everyday changes a lot. I think that's a big ADHD thing. One of the things that's tough about being neurodivergent is when it comes to like behavioral psychology, a lot of the studies, if they're like, well, this works for 70% of people, you might not be in that 70% because you're not a neurotypical person. So a lot of the things like I've read a lot about, I think a lot of people that are ADHD and anxious end up becoming self-help junkies because you're like, I got to figure this out, man. So I'm very much in that category. And so I've read so much about behavioral psychology. A lot of it has really helped me make a much more positive lifestyle. But some of it I've had to really alter. So especially things like habit formation. One of
Hmm.
the things that would happen is they would say, okay, do the same thing the same way. And if you do that enough, it'll become automatic. And right around the time it should become automatic, my body rejects it. I'm like, I am not doing this. I will lose it if I have to do this one more day. And so I've had to realize like, oh, I have to experiment and figure out what are my own ways of doing things. And so I have learned to develop habits like I run about 3 miles every other day and I run super slow. Maybe it sounds impressive to some people. I guarantee it's not. It's not impressive at all. And it's mostly mental health related. But the way that I've managed to create that habit over the past 7 years or whatever is I don't do the same thing the same way until it becomes automatic. I do the same thing a different way so that it's always fun. And
Yeah.
so my playlist is sacred. I'm like always updating it. I will listen to anything. I'll try anything that'll make it interesting to run. And so that's why, my approach I have to have I saw a meme the other day and I was like, this is it. Like I always used to say, ADHD, my to-do list, it doesn't matter what's on it. It can be small, it can be huge, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's always hard because I know there's an invisible to-do list or task at the top that is, how do I get myself to do any of this? How do
Hmm.
I get my brain to do this? And then I saw a meme the other day that was like, having ADHD is like knowing you have this evil elf that you have to figure out how to get them to do stuff without asking them directly or they'll curse you. That's so me. And so I've learned like, okay, I have to be a little bit gentle about my way in. So I've done a lot of different things to try to create productivity.
Yeah.
Now, like that can look like I usually try to get my exercise in at the start of the day because that's the hardest thing. And that creates some positive momentum towards taking care of stuff. But I usually, I kind of try to figure out like, what is the thing that if I don't get it done today, it's a problem and
Yeah.
try to do that first. Don't let myself procrastinate on a bunch of other things. And so, yeah, it's really a lot about like loving myself, but managing myself, learning what techniques work with this individual. And that's a big part of my everyday.
Yeah. And whenever I'm talking to people about their own productivity,
Yeah.
everyone wants the path. Everyone wants
Right.
like the formula to follow because, if you're going to do something, most people want to be successful and not like fail at it because people view failure as a whole other topic. But,
Right.
people want to be able to start something and do well with it. So everyone wants to know like, what's the path, Stacie? What's the path, Andy? And, I think back to this realization I had. I was working with someone for a while to help me figure out parts of my business. And they're the most regimented person I've ever met in my entire life. Every day, they're waking up and they're going doing CrossFit for like an hour and a half. And they have this methodical life that never shifts. And I don't think
Yeah.
they ever skipped working out one day in the
Yeah.
3 years that I was working with them. And, for a while, I was trusting that their way was the right way because they were successful. And
Yeah.
so it was actually like, I don't want to, this person, if they're listening, they know I'm talking about them. There's good parts too, but like I
Sure.
actually found myself in the most miserable part of being who I am because I literally had told myself, like, this is right. And I need to become this. Success
Yeah.
means becoming this very, very regimented, consistent, but I'm also consistent, just in a different way. And
Mm.
I get a lot done. I've let myself start changing my schedule whenever I need to. I used to be so like committed to things that I would do it at my own expense. My friends say I'm like a commitment holic, like I'll never give up something once I've said I'm going to do it. So
Yeah.
you have to know for me, if I like cancel a meeting or change it, like to me, that is like revolutionary because
Yeah.
I thought this is what success looked like. So whenever I stopped kind of following that mode, and I'm like you, I've read probably every productivity, every self-help book, everything about like finding myself, everything from the artist's way to like, everything about habit stacking and in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah.
And I guess what I find is like I can't actually follow the artist's way all the way through, even if it's
Yeah.
gentle with Julia Cameron. I also can't habit stack the way that like James Clear does. I'll do it for a few days, and I don't think that's bad. But
No.
people often feel like if there's a plan to follow and the person's successful they're following and they can't do it, that means they're broken. So this just is kind of a end to that idea that like, I don't know, you can't figure out what's good for you if you don't like give yourself permission to make those shifts and changes. Because for me, it's like tension. When I'm
Mm.
not living in a way that like serves me, I feel like I'm like there's two opposing magnets, and that's the feeling I have. And so anytime I can feel that relief, like the work's better, I'm happier, I sleep better, I have more fun, my team is way less stressed out by me, frankly. And that's what we all want in our creative work. But do you think that there's ever a point like have we earned the right, Andy, at this point in our careers to have that control because we've put in all the years of work before that? That's like kind of a weird thing to say, but sometimes I tell myself that like I've earned the right to be able to do this. That's kind of wrong thinking though sometimes. What do you think?
Why do you think it's wrong? I don't.
I'm
I don't
curious.
have an answer yet, but I'm curious
Okay,
what made you say
so
that.
I was brought up in an environment where you kind of have to earn like goodness and religiously that's the
Mm.
environment I was brought up in. Like even if it wasn't intended, my OCD brain interpreted like if you work hard for the things that you have to deserve what you have. The people who don't have what you have mean
Yeah.
that they don't deserve it because maybe there's something wrong in their life and they need to deal with that thing. So I have this whole baggage of
Yeah.
like needing to earn everything that I've had. It can't be easy, it can't be simple. So then I'm like, my brain has to tell myself, well, I'm 16 years in. I've earned the right to be able to do this. But could I have done that earlier and I'm just making up rules? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I was raised in a very similar way, so I totally get that. I definitely, even if it wasn't explicit, I wouldn't say that I
Yeah.
was like taught this. I do think it was just a culture of if you're in a bad situation, it's basically your fault, and it's mostly to do with
Yep.
you not working hard enough. And so I totally relate to that. I think again, the blessing of the in the curse of growing up with my mom, which she's just coming up a lot right now, is that I saw her try to live in a way that was not authentic, and it destroyed her over and over and over again. And so I knew, I don't think I had probably words to describe it, but that was the gift that she gave me. By the time I was 17, 18, I knew I'm not going to be able to, over the long haul, live in an inauthentic way, live in a way where I'm dying inside, pushing myself and trying, in scenarios that are dysregulating me. And I wouldn't have had any language for that, but that is what I noticed. And so I knew from the beginning, I'm going to have to figure out how to work with myself. And so now, having said that, I've had lots of periods of time in my 15-year plus creative journey where I have pushed myself too hard, burnout, had to unpick all of these different expectations. And also, not just expectations, you also have to deal with the reality of our culture and time and our economy and what's expected of you. And what, there are certain things that don't work for me.
Yeah,
and
right.
I still have to do them. That's there's a lot of stuff like that too. And so for me, it's more like, I think it's holding in tension those two realities, like doing enough research on myself, experimenting with how things work for me, also taking in information from other people and seeing what's possible given the circumstances I'm in. But I don't think it ever, these days, I don't think it ever comes down to a moral or ethical dilemma. I don't view it that way. So to me, it's more like, what kind of animals are we? And in the animals that we are, what am I? And, what kind of breed am I in this thing? And what tends to work for people like that? And what I've learned is, okay, most people, like some people think that ADHD came from like hunter-gatherers and that it's a particular kind of human and neurobiology. And so really I've learned, like, as a hunter type, I can be on 4 hours, but when I'm on, it's all on. It is as on, it's twice as alive as anyone else. So yeah, you're putting in an 8-hour day, but my 4-hour day,
Yeah.
I'm twice there, right? Now I usually work longer than that, but that's so that's some of that ethical moral dilemma actually showing up, defending myself. I work longer
Thank
than
God you said that,
4-hour
Andy, because I
days.
thought you were lazy. I was going to tell you later, but I'm glad you said it. I'm joking.
But I know I don't have much more than
Yeah.
4 good hours. And so the rest of the stuff is more like admin or, whatever. And if I have to do harder stuff for 8 hours or, sometimes longer than that, I know those have to be few and far between or they're going to destroy me. And so I try to bear all that in mind. The other thing that came to mind as you were talking through that was one of the big through lines on my show that dates all the way back to the early days of doing it is this idea of, I think of it like pulsing or non-dualism. And it's this way of realizing that I think where a lot of self-help stuff goes wrong is them saying, this is it. It's this. Do this thing. My experience is, and I think there's a lot of good reason why this is true, is it's never this. It's this and then that, this and then that. It's always a pulsing. I don't know that I don't have enough of a true science background to back this up, but I've read enough, books about it to feel like I've got something here where I think it's something about left and right brain hemisphere. I think it's something about needing, you hear this a lot in creative circles, the idea that you can't write and edit at the same time. So, and that could be writing, but it could just be creating. You can't create and edit. If you try to do those at the same time, your brain's going to just break. It's going to be exactly like what you're talking about with the magnets feeling, that feeling of like, this is not going to work. So if you're starting to create and your editor voice is already chiming in, you're not in the part of your brain that you need to be. And so for me, I've had to realize, like, it's not listen to the gurus or don't. It's not that. It's have a season of openness, have a season of closeness, have a season of open to, let's try James Clear's thing. Let's try Julia Cameron's thing. You have a season of that. Let's take that on. One of the things I think when I talk about loving yourself, cultivating yourself, the only thing about that I sometimes feel like, there's a missing piece here. And it's that in my early 20s, when I probably hated myself the most of that was pretty misguided. However, one part of it that I think was really useful was there was an emptying out of what I thought I was. There was a growth mindset that said I could become something different than I am. Now, there's a degree to which that I think can get you in trouble, but I got rid of a lot of hang-ups or assumptions about who I was, because before that, I thought I was an extrovert. I thought, that I couldn't exercise. I thought there's so many things I thought I couldn't do. And so I think for me, it's just like what I was talking to you about. I think before we started, I was talking about how I've taken this, to speak of another self-help guy, Cal Newport's approach to seasonality, where every season you're really embracing a different way of being. And so this also is a pulsing for me creatively, where I have a creative balance and a pendulum swing, where the summer I'm really taking in stuff and maintaining my career. And then in the fall, I'm taking a bigger project. And then in the winter, I'm stepping back and thinking about what is the next project going to be. And in the spring, I'm doing another big project. It doesn't work exactly like that, but it's kind of like that. And there's something about this. And I think that people that are probably mistaken as these are the right brain people, I actually think they're probably better at whole brain living, which is a Jill Bolte Taylor thing. Whole brain living being you're able to access the left brain, the editor, the executor, the logic person, and then swing back to the other side and be abstract and symbolic and fun and loose. And I think, to me, there's something, it's really difficult to live that way, mainly because from what I've read, the left brain really doesn't respect the right brain. So when you go over to that editor, this is what I've learned a lot when I talk a lot about creativity, a lot about career. I've learned if I start listening to too many business podcasts, I will have a hard time listening to the art podcasts. I will reach for them first because I'm in that left brain energy, and my left brain's like, dude, who gives a crap about that? Like, what? No, what? You need to get down to business. You need to make some money. Like, and I realized, like, oh no, I've recognized, like, oh, that's a siren. That is the thing that's luring me away. And then I listen to one art podcast. I'm like, this is what actually matters. So I don't know. I'm blabbing now, but there's something about this pulsing that I think is really key.
We had such a good conversation that we had to make this episode into 2 parts. This is the end of part 1. Join me next week for part 2.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, could you do me a favor? Could you subscribe to this podcast and then share it with one of your best art friends? I'd really appreciate it. And then head on over to Instagram and follow me at the Leverage Your Art account. And you can keep up with all of our future episodes. Thank you so much for your support. It means everything to have you here listening and learning. Bye.